When you take a step back, a real, critical look at the standard rebel archetype in tactical role-playing games, you usually find yourself staring at a wide-eyed idealist, or maybe a brooding, vengeance-driven victim. But Fire Emblem, the Binding Blade, does something completely, refreshingly different with Echidna. Instead of some grand, destiny-chosen savior, the game throws a character at us who operates less like a revolutionary martyr, and far more like a tired, pragmatically minded general contractor, someone just trying, desperately, to build a stable apartment complex right in the middle of an active war zone. Right from the moment of her chaotic introduction, Echidna completely upends our standard, conditioned expectations of wartime leadership, substituting grandiose, sweeping political rhetoric with hyperfixated, material goals, specifically, her intense obsession with constructing a completely free, self-sustaining village for the displaced, forgotten refugees of the Western Isles. Peeling back the layers of her core psychology, we stumble upon this fascinating, deeply layered friction between her external, effortlessly flippant bravado, and a tightly locked, heavily guarded reservoir of existential dread. Rather than chasing abstract, geopolitical glory, or nursing a bitter desire for personal retribution, her primary behavioral driver stems from a fierce, almost territorial protective compulsion, an instinct that regularly manifests, quite brilliantly, through the psychological mechanism of reverse psychology. We witness this firsthand, clearly, during her casual interactions with younger, hot-headed fighters like Ward or Lot, where she intentionally deploys a conversational strategy of playful mockery. She is constantly, relentlessly reminding them of their fragile mortality, teasing them about sprouting grey hairs before they even hit 30, which, honestly, is a pretty solid burn. Telling them, flat out, that they are far too weak, or casually remarking, with a smirk, that they can go ahead and get killed because she will happily handle the cleanup, serves as a textbook, psychological defense mechanism. This protects her own mind, shielding it from the agonizing, paralyzing trauma of loss in an environment where operational mortality rates fluctuate wildly, proving that Echidna definitely has a massive axe to grind with imperialist bureaucracy, even if she refuses, stubbornly, to let anyone see her sweat. If you consider, deeply, the stark socio-economic disparity woven directly into the fabric of Eli Bean law, women climbing the martial ladder typically belong to elite Pegasus Knight squads, or noble, aristocratic houses, yet Echidna commands a rough, incredibly volatile resistance outfit through sheer, unadulterated physical dominance. The creative team left massive, gaping voids in her official history, completely skipping over her arduous journey, which naturally invites some highly logical, narrative-driven deductive speculation regarding her formative, childhood years. We can reasonably extrapolate an upbringing completely stripped of comfort, a youth brutally interrupted by Etruria's insatiable, colonialist appetite, which essentially transformed her entire homeland into a glorified, heavily policed labor camp. Her absolute mastery of axes, weapon systems traditionally relegated by developers to unrefined mountain bandits, or desperate manual laborious, signals a total, uncompromising rejection of elegant, high society fencing styles in favor of raw, utilitarian kinetic power. Echidna effectively weaponizes the very iconography of the exploited working class, converting a basic tool of subjugated manual labor into a lethal instrument of armed rebellion, establishing her vital, structurally essential narrative function. Echidna operates as a brilliant, proletarian counterweight to the highborn, sheltered aristocracy dominating Roy's army, grounding an otherwise fantastical story about ancient dragons and divine lineages right into the gritty, unvarnished reality of systemic exploitation. Her visual design, too, speaks volumes about this internal, psychological reality, utilizing an organic, grounded color palette of deep, earthy greens and muted ochre tones, which allows her to blend, effortlessly, into the rugged, unyielding topography of her environment. The inclusion of heavy, spiked metal pauldrons functions as a literal, physicalized carapace, a somatic presentation of the thick, emotional calluses she has constructed over years of brutal guerrilla warfare. Even her choice of a massive, double-bitted axe reinforces this inherent duality, achieving a beautiful subversion of traditional class archetypes by pairing an unglamorous, heavy weapon with an exceptionally high, surgical in-game skill statistic, showing her combat methodology relies on absolute precision, never on mindless, reckless brutality. When analyzing her interpersonal relationship dynamics, it becomes obvious how masterfully Echidna alters her social mask. With Geese, a former legitimate merchant driven into piracy by total economic collapse, she drops the sarcastic teasing entirely, engaging, instead, in a blunt, deeply empathetic dialogue regarding how conflict inevitably compromises human morality. Her dynamic with Gonzalez, though, is perhaps the most profound, as she completely bypasses his severe facial deformities and limited communicative intelligence, treating him, remarkably, not with patronizing, condescending pity, but with genuine, humanizing respect, offering him a steady job and a legitimate, safe haven in her future sanctuary. This beautifully illuminates the profound, almost poetic irony behind her nomenclature, which is clearly borrowed, intentionally, from the Greek mythological figure Echidna, famously dubbed the mother of monsters. But instead of breeding terrifying, venomous beasts to plague humanity, Echidna in Fire Emblem, the binding blade acts as a fiercely protective beacon for society's perceived monsters, gathering the outcasts, the pirates, the deformed, and the broken combatants that the ruling elite discarded like garbage. She effectively reclaims the derogatory, dehumanizing labels pinned onto her people by imperial oppressors, transforming a terrifying, ancient symbol of monstrosity into a beautiful emblem of community preservation, proving, ultimately, that true heroism isn't about wearing pristine, shining armor, or inheriting legendary swords, but about having the absolute stomach to look at a shattered world, grab a heavy, rusted tool, and build a home, piece by piece, right out of the dirt.